Hello, Fountain here, and today I'm going to be doing a very exciting video. Well, I feel very excited about doing this video, and that is what you might want to consider when you're purchasing one of these babies. Yes, if you have never seen one of these before, then I highly recommend looking up the word handpan. If you're feeling very cool now that you've seen this weird looking spaceship style instrument, please go do your research. But here we're going to obviously be talking about the handpan to those that are looking at really purchasing one. Hopefully you know a little bit about it already. It's a rather expensive instrument, or I consider it a rather expensive instrument. It's also an instrument that if you get damaged, it can be really hard to get it back into the original tuning and the original notes that it was made in as well. So yeah, a lot of care should be obviously taken into deciding what to buy, how to maintain it, how to store it, all of those sort of things, what to look for. I was very lucky, I guess you could say, in some aspects, in that my, well, not necessarily lucky, but you know, depending on how you look at it, my father, he passed over last year, and he had a little bit of money. You know, he lived a very simple life, but he had a little bit of money left over from all the estate costs, things like that. And I was very fortunate to then be able to use that money to purchase myself a beautiful, lovely handpan. He never really got to see me play music. We live in different nations, and now that I have this, and I also have other instruments now that I've accumulated over time, I feel like he never gets to miss out on seeing me play music. So yeah, anyway, because of it being a rather expensive instrument, I would sort of estimate it to be usually around $1,500 to $3,000 US to purchase a handpan, and that's not talking about the very original handpans from back in the early 2000s. Obviously the price ranges can get lower, they can also get much higher, but that would be, I guess, the good kind of estimate, the kind of money that you might want to be saved, or have saved should I say, to then be looking at purchasing a handpan. So I guess there's sort of, I would categorize it into three main, obviously, ways of obtaining one. One being obviously purchasing through secondhand. Someone else has already bought it and now they're wishing to pass on the instrument. Another option being you find a maker who has like very sort of default options of, okay, these are the ones that we sell, and then there's also those that make them that are more custom made. So I guess there's a bit of pros and cons in all three of those options. With the secondhand one, it's, you know, some of the downsides are you obviously run the risk of it being out of tune, it being damaged. If you're buying it from someone who's not really a maker or a regular reseller of instruments, then you obviously run the risk of, you know, can you trust the person? Is it going to get damaged on the way here? All of those kind of things. However, you know, it can be a bit cheaper if it is what you want to purchase, obviously secondhand than brand new, and also you're not sort of contributing more into the kind of, as some would say, consumer kind of economy that we're in, especially in the Western society. Now with the ones that are kind of, they're brand new and they sort of have the default options, obviously the cost, it can be quite expensive. There's a bit of lack of customization, and it's usually like a much more established business. So if you're wanting to support a more smaller business, or just a sort of you know, a single person with the purchase, then you know that kind of pulls you out of that aspect of it. However, like, for some people, they like the option of not being overwhelmed by too much choice. Like, it's okay, I've found a reputable maker that I really like, really resonates with me, and they just have two options. Okay, there's only two options for me to decide. So some people like that, not having to be so overwhelmed by so many options and then so many things that they have to consider. And then obviously there's the custom made option. So once again, it can still be expensive, the cost, but that will obviously depend on the maker. So if it's a single maker, they might not have huge overheads. They might be cheaper, they might be more expensive. I don't know, because I haven't never bought a custom made handpan. Obviously you need to know what you want as well. Like, because it's custom made, they're going to probably give you a lot more options, and you kind of really need to know what you want. You know, most handpans that I've seen are sort of like, you know, 440 hertz. The center, center key is D in the top. But yeah, I guess with the custom makers, I tend to find that they are smaller businesses, so that's nice to be able to support that kind of activity as well. So let's sort of get into some of the other things that I think you should consider. I'm not like the be-all, end-all knowledge of handpans. I'm not making myself out to be an expert. These are just things that I have considered to be kind of important if you want to consider buying a handpan. And one of the main ones, or the first ones I think you should consider, is what is your purpose for the handpan? Like, if you're a musician or you want to become a musician and you want to play with other musicians, most musicians are going to play in the tuning which we know is 440 hertz. So, you know, most people are just probably going to want to get a 440 hertz handpan. However, if you're wanting to get into more healing purposes, or you want to play music with other musicians who are also interested in alternative being the word, but alternative tunings, you know, then you probably want to look at the other kind of tunings that you can get the instruments made into. And, you know, I personally love 432 hertz. There's a multitude of other tunings out there. There's obviously a whole range of like solfeggio tunings that you might want to look into as well. Because that, from my experience and what I can see, and even what science is starting to show, is actually more beneficial when you're using it for assisted healing purposes. And you know what? It could be a little bit of a magic in that people might resonate more with your music. You know, even if you're not using it for sort of assisted healing purposes, you're just wanting to jam as a musician with other musicians, it might make your music even more popular. People might not understand, you might not even promote that you're playing in different tunings, but it's just a good thing to look into. I highly recommend it. If you want to learn more about different frequencies, I'd highly recommend that you go down to the description box below and click onto the link that my partner and I have for the sound healing certified practitioner course that we run online. And that course goes into a lot more into different frequencies and tunings. And it's no longer sort of necessarily some kind of woo-woo spiritual thing, you know, or just sort of only held within particular religious beliefs or particular ancient civilization beliefs. Science is now starting to get the tools to be able to measure these certain things, and science is starting to prove how important some of these things are and the potentialities of these things, you know, to the point where you can actually destroy physical matter with sound, or you can like create some really magical things with sound. But I won't go too much more into that. Go into the description box below if you want to learn some more about that. Right, next thing obviously is using your ears. Obviously, if you're someone who is hearing impaired, you might have other ways in which you would engage with sound. But if you are used to using your ears as an engager of sound, use your ears. So if you're looking online, click on the video links, click on the audio links. If you're in a shop, listen to the instrument when it's being played. Obviously also do your research into what makes a really good handpan. So things about tuning, as I kind of talked about before, harmonics, percussion, balance, dynamic, range, all of these kind of terms. If you're not sure what they are, you know, go away, do your research. Internet is a little bit like all sorts out there. I know not all of the information is necessarily true, but at least it'll give you a bit of guidance around what some of these things are. And, you know, especially if you're going to a store and you want to purchase this from the store, like get in contact with the people and say, hey, look, like I'm you know, have a chat with them about these things. Like, I want to get a handpan, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, hopefully they're going to steer you in the right direction, not just necessarily because they want, obviously they're going to want to sell you something, but they might still be able to give you an idea of what the sort of things you need to be looking for. Also, another great option, if you've actually got the ability to, is to use your hands. So play the instrument, or even if it's not the ones you're looking at buying, if you've got friends, if you've got people that you know that have them, get in contact with them, see if they will let you play. Some people not, because it can be a very precious instrument, and with some people are just very precious about their instruments in general. But if they're willing to let you play, then have a play around with some of these things. Pick up the little things here and there from people, little tips that they might have about the handpan that they use and why they use that one and why they prefer that one, or maybe they got one and now they wish they had something else because of this, that, and the other thing. Also, consider things like, do you like major notes? Do you like minor notes? Do you like flavorful notes? Like, usually a handpan has around sort of 8 to 10 notes. You can sometimes get them on the bottom as well. The thing with getting a lot of notes is that it's more likely to become out of tune. So there's a risk that you run if you want a lot of notes in your handpan. It kind of increases your chances of it becoming out of tune. Obviously, if you want less notes, you're going to have less variety in the sounds that you're going to be able to make with the one handpan. But it may increase your chances of it not being out of tune, or becoming out of tune as easily. Now, obviously, another sort of sense, but not really kind of related to our 5 senses that we often talk about, especially within the science, logical, left brain thinking, la-di-da, is using your instincts. So, with your gut, with your heart, with your pituitary gland or pineal gland, using that as a guidance around, should I get a handpan? Which one should I get? So feeling into all of that can be a good guidance tool, but that again also depends on how well you are connected with your instinct and whether you're used to using your instinct. So anyway, I won't go too much into that. And then also, because they are a steel drum, like they are, I guess, they originate kind of from the idea of the steel drums in places like Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. So, steel can be made from kind of lots of different varieties of steel, right? You've got a raw steel, you've got steel coated, you've got nitrated steel, you've got stainless steel. So these instruments can be made from different steel, and each kind of steel will have a purpose in which it could be good for. So it's, once again, depending on what you want to use it for, what kind of player of the instrument you are or you want to become. So they all have their own pros and cons. Do your research around that. Another thing to consider is the size of the instrument. Like, a lot of them are very much the same size. You can get some variations of the handpan that are not necessarily handpan. Like, I know you can get really small ones where you use like sticks that have got rubber balls on them to play. They're not really a handpan, but they're something else. They're much smaller. They're also much less likely to get out of tune. I've seen another instrument, I think it's called something like a rav drum, where it's a lot flatter, and it has, like, the material has shapes cut out of it, and that is less likely to get out of tune. Once again, a little bit cheaper, it's sometimes a bit smaller. So yeah, definitely look at different size options depending on the space that you live in. Are you quite nomadic? Do you travel a lot? So you really want to consider that sort of stuff. Also, when you're looking at purchasing one, you want to consider the service of the maker and the seller. If you're not getting it from a shop, you're not buying it second hand from someone just down the road, you want to also be thinking about shipping, collection options, all of that, because they can be easily damaged, and once they are, obviously, can get out of tune quite easily, and then it's really hard to get back in tune, as I said at the start. You really want to consider those sort of shipping options, if there is a collection option as well. And also, maintenance. There is a particular level of maintenance that you'll need to do on your handpan, depending on the steel that it is, depending on the climate, depending on how often you use it, depending on how you store it. So obviously request as much information as possible. Like, if you're buying it from a maker, ask them, hey, look, I want to buy this one. what do you recommend in regards to maintenance? Like, I buy a particular oil for my drum, but it's also oil that people use for other things that are not even necessarily instruments. So definitely do your research around that, because they can rust, and obviously that can start to affect the instrument as well. And I guess the last thing is just do not be in a hurry. Like, I'd been thinking about purchasing a handpan for maybe about 2 years at least before I even got one. And I started looking into getting one like very, very shortly before my father passed. And so it took me about sort of 2 months to find something that I liked. And then obviously it took a while for it to be shipped over, because it was an Italian-made handpan all the way away from Italy. And as we know, shipping's been a little bit funny in the last sort of year or so. We don't need to go into the reasons why in regards to shipping things around the world and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, if there were 432 hertz, good quality handpans close to where I lived, I would have much rather have gone to a local shop and purchased that, or a local maker and got that. I wasn't aware of any, hence why I got it shipped in from overseas. There's obviously a lot of taxes that were involved in that, more patience and waiting for that. And then obviously there's the environmental impact of getting something like that instead of buying it more locally made. So I am well aware of that. It's just most drums are made in 440, and that's not what I wanted, because I'm not here to play instruments just for musical entertainment purposes. Like my main purpose, in which I like to play, is for assisted healing. It's nice to play with other musicians, and I do that. My partner is a musician. However, you know, other than him, it's quite hard to find people that are really into alternative tunings. But that's okay. That's a whole other video for a whole other day. So yeah, I hope these things have considered with, well, they're helpful with you considering what you need to get a drum that's going to suit what you want. So if you've got any more questions, you're welcome to leave that in the comment section down below. And I'm also on a couple of other social media platforms. Do check out the sound healing practitioner course as well, if you're interested in that. And if you also want to go any kind of sound journeys, I also have some offerings coming up for that as well. So just let me know. You can obviously private email me if you want to engage with some of that. And I would like to see you in the next vlog if you feel called to stick around for that. And we'll see you soon.